I don't know why I feel like this is going to be a controversial take, but ChatGPT should not be your therapist.
I literally saw a post where someone said, I'm done venting to friends, I'm done talking to people, I'm done going to therapy, I'm just going to tell ChatGPT my problems.
It just validates you and makes your feelings feel like they're correct. Like, you should be feeling this way.
What sense does it make to go to ChatGPT? Actually, I'll tell you what sense it makes. People who don't want any accountability, people who don't want to be challenged, people who don't want to grow, people who don't want to actually understand that sometimes you might be the problem.
Gen Z doesn't want real therapy anymore, and in fact, they rather turn to AI. As crazy as this might sound, this is genuinely real. Gen Z is using ChatGPT to talk about their problems, their feelings, and even their trauma. And honestly, this says a lot. Not only just how smart AI has gotten over the years, but how hard it is for people to actually feel safe and to really open up to another person. Which ultimately got me thinking and spawned the questions of, why are people doing this? Is this actually helping, or are we actually avoiding real help? Well, that is what I want to talk about in today's video, not only just breaking down those questions, but ultimately just looking at why people are trusting ChatGPT more when it comes to their issues and their traumas and their feelings, as opposed to real life people in a therapy setting. One of the very first reasons is because I believe we live in such a hyper-criticism culture that in a way it can deter people from actually going to therapy. Now, as kind of weird as this might sound, just because usually if criticism from online, especially if it's constructive criticism, shouldn't be something that should be taken personally, in my personal opinion. But ultimately, criticism towards just people, therapy, or whatever it might be, I can see why it puts this shield in front of you subconsciously, to where you might view the online space, especially the online space, as something that, all right, you can get a laugh out of, you can kind of engage in, but in the back of your head, you're kind of wondering if you're next, in a sense. Let's take, for example, like VR chat. In VR chat, you can completely customize your character to whatever you want it to look like. So because of that, in real life, you can look like, let's just be real, a slob. You can look like just a complete person that is out of order in their life. Personal hygiene is not it. Body is not it. Just whatever the case may be. And you can have the most fit, most looking, aesthetically pleasing player on the game. So because of that, even though people are giving you compliments on the game and whatnot, you know that in real life you're very much the complete opposite. So it puts this shield in front of you between the person that is actually playing the game and the person that is being portrayed in the game. So because of this, I can see why a lot of people might reside to just sticking online and not going to therapy. Or even if they do go to therapy online, they see reviews and they see a lot of criticism of online therapy and how it's not good for you. This company's a scam. This doesn't even really work. They're gonna judge you, and all these different things that come in your mind, that I can see why someone might be like, you know what, the online space when it comes to therapy, or even just going to real life therapy, it's so unstable, it is so uncertain in a sense. It's kind of like this wild card factor that I might as well go to AI, because AI, the allure of going to AI is the fact that it's stable. You know what you're getting out of it, and that there's no one really there to judge you. I believe another reason this happens as well is because the sheer amount of personas you can portray online. Because the barrier to entry is so low to post YouTube videos or to write blogs, pretty much at this point you just need your phone and an internet connection. You can play whatever type of archetype that you want on YouTube. If you want to be kind of that best friend role, you can do that. If you want to be the teacher, you can do that. If you want to be the expert, you can very well do that. And while over time it's going to be easy to spot whether or not you're an actual expert of the subject or whatnot, ultimately speaking, you can portray yourself in a way so because of that, you can just give a little bit of advice and just charge someone for it. And while I'm not necessarily saying there is nothing wrong with charging people online for your services, ultimately, if you are genuinely, and I mean genuinely, providing value to your customers, by all means, there's no problem with that. But when there is so many leading experts in their field, when in reality they're not actually experts, whether it's in the medical field or even just, psychology, just in the space of therapy, I can see why a lot of people, when they go online, they just have this lack of trust, because they go on a YouTube video and it feels like, all right, this guy's kind of giving some advice, and then ultimately you pay for something and the services do not match what your expectation was, and it's just kind of a disappointment. You don't really trust that avenue anymore. Or maybe you've seen a lot of videos on this specific company and how they're bad, so now you're thinking, all right, I can't even really trust that now. And then now you're just kind of left thinking, all right, what do I do now? Do I just Google therapist near me and then you kind of just read the review? I can see why just just the process of it entirely can just turn someone off and just be like, you know what, bro, it's too much work, for one, just to actually research for it, and two, just having to actually pick someone that I resonate with, someone that is actually providing value and that can help me. That's already another stepping stone in itself. So it's like, you know what, let me just go to ChatGPT. Let me just boot it up. Let me just speak my problem. And not only can it just give me an actual answer, it's not like Google where it's like, all right, you got like links to certain pages. No, it can give me a very personalized answer, just giving basically game to me, and I can control everything. And as scary as that might sound, that isn't even the worst part. The environment, the people that people curate, whether intentionally or not, is ultimately the part that a lot of people fall into. When you're using ChatGPT as a therapist, whether you realize it or not, you are able to control a lot of things. Once again, unlike when it comes to real life or even just online therapy, when it has to do with real people, real emotions, and just ultimately unpredictable circumstances, when it comes to ChatGPT, you are allowed to control everything. The pace of the conversation, the topic of it, how deep you can go, everything is completely in your control and your fingertips. And while someone can see this very thing and think to themselves, all right, this is something that I actually can use to my advantage and ultimately use it to better my therapy session, that unlike my therapist might actually give to me, I can provide it via ChatGPT. Ultimately, a lot of people might even use this in a negative way. And what I mean by a negative way is that they use it in a way to kind of protect themselves. Once again, kind of going back to the first point I made, because there is still that shield of feeling like there is going to get criticized and whatnot, you can ultimately kind of play around with the settings and make it to where you don't really actually dig deep on what you need to dig deep into. When you curate a space where it is just solely with the intention of just protecting your feelings, you ultimately miss out on so much emotional risk and confrontation. And while those words can kind of seem negative and feel like it's something that you don't want to experience, when it comes to something like therapy or just human interactions in general, as much as we want to accept the positives of having a positive interaction with someone, them listening to us and giving real-time feedback and ultimately just being a presence that we can lean on, it seems like we just want the benefits of a friendship and a therapist role, but we don't want the negatives that come with it. We don't want to be challenged on our beliefs. We don't want to be challenged on our emotions, and ultimately we don't want to have a sense of accountability, because having that a sense of accountability and responsibility is scary. It's scary to someone when they don't really feel like they can actually live up to that. So why not just create this space where I can take a little bit of accountability on something that I know I can realistically fulfill on a day-to-day basis, but I'm skipping out on the main thing that I actually need to work on. Maybe you can even go there to ignore the main thing you need to work on. You're thinking of, oh, hey chat, I'm having this problem right here with this particular person, but then when you have the opportunity to dig deep, ultimately ignore it, and you kind of create this echo chamber. And that right there is the worst part about it, is the echo chamber that you create via ChatGPT. See, I think what a lot of people don't realize is that ChatGPT, as the recording of this, it is July 16, 2025, it is not as advanced as people think. And then in fact, even the CEO of ChatGPT was very surprised to see that a lot of people were using ChatGPT on a day-to-day basis and almost relying on it as their crutch, which goes to show you that if the CEO of ChatGPT is saying this, then maybe, just maybe, you shouldn't necessarily rely on it, especially if you're using it as a crutch for your therapy sessions, and that you should kind of have these boundaries. The same way how we, talk about with boundaries, setting it with people and whatnot. That's something you hear a lot in therapy. It's the same way where you should set boundaries with ChatGPT. By all means, if you want to use it as a tool to further educate yourself on certain things, by all means. But if you're using it as an emotional crutch to get you through the day, then that is where the problem can really lie, because once again, a lot of people don't realize that ChatGPT is pretty agreeable. If you do not really set a foundation and tell ChatGPT, hey, when you are giving me these answers, be unbiased, do not be a yes man, and ultimately just give me the hard cold truth. Then the problem that you run into if you don't do that is that it just tends to agree with you, which can be really bad, because if you're talking about interpersonal problems, which, obviously if you're using it as a therapist role, that's what you're doing, then you're just going to be stuck in this echo chamber and not take responsibility and not really take just accountability on what you need to really do. You might tell ChatGPT, hey chat, I'm going through this issue with this one person, and you might give your side of the story. Let's be real. Let's just be honest with each other, especially when it comes to talking about people. We tend to really just give our one side of the story. We don't want to look at things from the other person's perspective. So of course, ChatGPT, that's the only information they got, they're going off of. So you go off of that, plus the fact they're agreeable. What type of answer do you think you're going to get? You're going to get an answer that's going to say like, oh, it's okay, they're the toxic ones, and that you need to separate yourself, this and that. And ChatGPT, like, this is going to give that type of answer. When in reality, if you were to actually go to real therapy, you might be prompted with the answer of, hey, maybe, what if maybe, just maybe, if you are continuously running into the same issues with your friendships, what if possibly you might be the problem? Having that kind of mirror flip back on you, that question flip back on you, forcing you to actually look at yourself in the mirror is what we avoid a lot of the times. So we go to ChatGPT to essentially just eliminate that entirely. But when you eliminate half of the equation of a human interaction, obviously the bad side is what you're trying to eliminate, then ultimately you don't get the full experience. You don't get the full human experience of therapy and ultimately allow yourself to grow. At the end of the day, growth requires friction, and this is something that ChatGPT does not require. And that if you genuinely are a real person that really wants to grow, if you genuinely want to get out of the situation you're in and become a better person, then taking that wild card of going through the rounds, maybe, yeah, sure, you go to real therapy or online therapy and you might have a therapist that might roast you or something, or is rather not even roast you, but just is not a great fit for you. Okay, cool. That doesn't mean that you immediately, just cry about it and play victim and say, oh, well, I guess this doesn't work for me. You post it on a subreddit. You take initiative. You actually look for a therapist that actually is for you, whether it's you actually replacing it or just going through a different avenue, till you find that support system, till you find a person that can genuinely support you, because going through all of that will provide way more character development ultimately than just ChatGPT. Despite talking about how crazy it is for Gen Z to be using ChatGPT as their therapist and all the negative effects that come with it, when you actually sit and break it down, it really isn't all that crazy that we're in this situation in the first place. When you really break down the elements of what makes up ChatGPT being used as a therapist, it's either you can text it out or you can just speak it. So when you really break those elements down, you see that us Gen Zers, we've been doing this for a long time. We've been texting people, whether it's DMing, writing a letter, writing a school assignment, whatever it is. We've been texting for a long time. And we've also been speaking, whether it's been, speaking on the phone with someone, FaceTiming someone, or even just making a YouTube video and just talking into the camera. So these elements of what makes up ChatGPT, it's not foreign to us. It's not like you take like our grandparents who can't even know, like who don't even know where the keyboard is, or they don't even know like what are you talking about talking inside of a phone? What are you talking about? Like that's foreign to them. So of course, when they look at ChatGPT as a therapist, if they can even comprehend what ChatGPT is, of course to them it's much more of an adjustment to actually making it something where they do on a frequent basis. But for us people that, us Gen Zers, we've been doing this for so long that us using ChatGPT as a therapist, it isn't this kind of like weird thing that is, just full of shame and it's like, oh man, what is this foreign concept to us? No, it's if anything, it's kind of just like Instagram. It's kind of like Discord, for example. It's any other app that has a voice feature and that you can text. The only shame that I can see you having with ChatGPT as your therapist is the fact that your friends might make fun of them, and that your friends, or maybe just you see online content making fun of people who use ChatGPT as a therapist, which once again coincides with the first point I made, talking about how we live in such a hyper criticism culture. It ultimately creates this shameful cycle where it feels like you can't tell people that you're actually using it, but you feel like you need to use it. So ultimately you just keep using it in silence and in secret, and this whole time you're using it as a therapist, you're telling its problem, maybe, hey, I went out with my friend and this issue happened. You kind of have this sense of guilt in the back of your head while you're using it, but at the same time it's like, I feel shameful, I feel guilty for this, but at the same time, I feel like I really, really, really need this. Also, another reason why it's not that crazy for Gen Zers to use ChatGPT is because of how low the barrier to entry really is. Just how I talked about how the barrier to entry is very low to make content online. It's the same way when it comes to ChatGPT, because you literally just need to install the app or just go on the website, create an account, and you're pretty much good. As with when it comes to therapy, whether it's online or in person, there is a huge barrier, or rather it's not that huge, but there is a barrier nonetheless. You have to look for the right therapist. You have to pay a lot of money. Let's just be real, like financially speaking, there are big financial implications when it comes to it. Once again, you have to find a therapist that you actually match with, and just entirely that whole process of looking for a therapist. I can see why there's the allure of ChatGPT, just because, especially if you don't really know anything about it, it can be like, wait, what? I can speak into this and it can give me a very personalized answer with different perspectives. Oh my God, that's crazy. And I also don't have to go through the process of finding a therapist. Like, it saves you time and it ultimately saves you money, which are factors that, us humans in general, like we really like. We really like when we can save money, when we can save time, we can save a lot of effort. And these are things that ChatGPT can fulfill on the surface level, which creates this allure of feeling like you want to use it, and ultimately something that you feel like you need to use, especially if you're using it a lot. It doesn't really give you the full experience. It's kind of this cheap little experience you can get that doesn't ultimately really solve your problems, and you can't really grow from. And one of the scariest part about this is that every generation after this is only going to see AI as more and more normal. Right now, we're kind of in this weird stage of, yes, like we can see there's this big divide, especially if you go online and see the content. There's a bunch of people who are an advocate of this, saying that ChatGPT saved their lives when it comes to therapy and how it saved them expenses and all these different things that it saved them in. While on the other hand, you have people saying that this is very bad and that we got to stop using ChatGPT as our therapist because this is not really serving us. There's ultimately a big divide. And while I do believe that there's always going to be a divide, it feels like as every generation goes on more and more, it's going to be less and less of a divide, and it's going to become more normalized, which is a little bit scary when you think about it. But ultimately, I do think that there is still going to be that subsection of people who do view therapy, real life therapy, whether it's online therapy or in-person therapy, as still valuable, and that can ultimately grow. If Gen Z is turning AI into therapy, then this is only the beginning. But the next question is what else are we replacing? Click the video on the screen to find out next, and I will see you in the next video. Peace.